We're talking about statistics. It's Chapter 1, Section 1.2, which is Observational Studies versus Designed Experiments. We're going over vocabulary so that we can get an A on the test because that's what we really like. The first piece of vocabulary, an observational study. An observational study measures the value of the response variable without attempting to influence the value of either the response or explanatory variables. That is, in an observational study, the researcher observes the behavior of the individuals without trying to influence the outcome of the study. They just sit back and watch and see what happens and write it down. An explanatory variable is also known as the independent or predictor variable. It explains variations in the response variable. In an experimental study, it's manipulated by the researcher. A response variable, that's also known as the dependent or outcome variable. Its value is predicted or its variation is explained by the explanatory variable. In an experimental study, this is the outcome that's measured following manipulation of the explanatory variable. A designed experiment, well, that's when the researcher assigns the individuals in a study to a certain group and then intentionally changes the value of an explanatory variable. Then they record the value of the response variable for each group. So they're manipulating the data there. A confounding, the word confounding in a study occurs when the effects of two or more explanatory variables are not separated. Therefore, any relation that may exist between an explanatory variable and the response variable may be due to some other variable or variables not accounted for in the study. A lurking variable is an explanatory variable that was not considered in a study, but that affects the value of the response variable in the study. In addition, lurking variables are typically related to explanatory variables considered in the study. This is really important. Super critical to remember this. Observational studies do not allow a researcher to claim causation, only association. So remember those lurking variables, they can be kind of tricky. A confounding variable is an explanatory variable that was considered in a study whose effect cannot be distinguished from a secondary or a second explanatory variable in the study. So lurking was not considered and confounding variable was considered. Lastly, just to wrap it up, we have three major categories of observational studies. The first one is cross-sectional studies. That's an observational study that collects data at one particular time. The second one is case control studies. That's an observational study that requires individuals to look back in time, a retrospective study. And then number three is cohort studies. That's observational studies that track individuals repeatedly over time, perspective. That's cohort studies. Our last word is a census. It's a list of all individuals in a population along with certain characteristics of each individual. That's our last term for Section 1.2. I hope these terms help you get an A on the test.